Welcome, everybody. So happy to have you here. Oh, Hero! It's so great to see you. Nikki, Naomi, Vanda, all the people. So good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. Um, uh, it's going fast, so I'm missing you, some of you, but thank you so much for being with me. Oh, so good to see you. Oh, um, welcome, Cape Cod. Aw. Um, happy Halloween. Every day is Halloween because we're all wearing our mask of ego, right? This personality, this mask of Carrie. I'm wearing it every day. So every day is Halloween. But I actually purposely put this session on Halloween because today we're going to be talking about spiritual bypassing, which is a really rich subject, a really deep subject. I've been wanting to do this session for a long time. And like all of the session themes that I choose, one afternoon is really not enough time to go deep into it, but it's just like distilling it down to the essence. But the reason that I wanted to do it on Halloween was just because, Halloween is about dressing up and, pretending to be someone else. And I really do think in many ways we all do that every day. We all kind of dress ourselves up in this persona that we are, showing to the world. And in many ways, the spiritual journey is about dismantling that mask, so that we can really be as we are and meet one another as we are in the heart, genuinely. And so, spiritual bypassing is a really important subject, I think, because we'll talk about it, but basically, we can sometimes use our spirituality also as a mask to hide from ourselves. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. So, so happy that you're all here. All of your little bubbles just make me so happy. So, if any of you are new to me and my live sessions, my name is Carrie, and I'm a devotional singer. I sing mantras and all kinds of music, sacred music. I really think music is a very powerful portal to connect us to a deeper part of ourselves and of something greater in this universe, beyond words. It takes us so deep into the heart and it unifies us, in our common humanity. Music is the language of the heart. So I love music, and I also love all of the spiritual traditions of the world. All of the contemplative and mystical traditions are fascinating to me, and so I've studied them for most of my life and know basically nothing because it's just this vast ocean. But I'm constantly fascinated by it. So I hope to offer you something that brings all of those things together. So thank you so much, Kim. So, welcome to all of you. And I'm going to begin, as I always do, with an invocation. And invocation, I know am very redundant, but sometimes it's good to hear things over and over again, at least for myself. I'm pretty much saying everything to myself because I need to hear it. Um, but an invocation to me is like just a way of acknowledging that we're about to cross a threshold to enter into this time together, which is a really special opportunity that we have to be together in this genuine way. And so singing an invocation to me is just a way of acknowledging that and calling in, the blessings for the path ahead, that everybody who's here from now until the end will receive exactly what is needed at this time, even if somebody just comes in the last 5 minutes. May they receive whatever they need in this moment. That's my prayer with the invocation, and also for myself, that I could be open for whatever wants to come through, because I certainly um, don't know, what's going to happen. I just have to try to be open, receptive. So I'm going to sing my invocation, which is a prayer to my spiritual teacher, Amma, and a very, very short uh, part of the Guru Paduka Stotram, a very beautiful prayer that honors the feet that are the embodiment of wisdom of the teacher. It's an honoring of all of our teachers, the teacher within and the teacher without, in whatever form or formlessness that that may take. So relax, and if you can, be in a place where you won't be disturbed. Usually my sessions are 90 minutes, so please stay as long as you like, as long as you can. My instrument is down here. You can't see it. It's called a harmonium. So you're seeing my hand here because I'm pumping the instrument, just so you know. But you can't see it.
Vatsayamritavarshiniim sumaturam sankirtanalapinim Shyamangim madhusita suktim amritanandatmikam Ishwarim Om Amriteshwari Namah Om Amriteshwari Namah Om Amriteshwari Namah Ananta samsara samudratara Naukaitaviyam Guru Bhakti Davyam Airagya Samrahanjata Pujanabhyam Namo Namah Shri Guru Padukabhyam Namo Namah Shri Guru Padukabhyam Namo Namah Shri Guru Padukabhyam Namo 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 Namo
Thank you. I have a little frog in my throat. So today, the session is on spiritual bypassing. And there's so many different angles and ways to approach this conversation. um, Usually, after I set a live session, I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? This is like a massive subject. But so the term spiritual bypassing it's actually become pretty well known in recent last couple of years. A lot of people have been using that term, and it's become kind of widely known and accepted um, in the spiritual world, whatever that means. Is people often talk about bypassing. Um, but when I first heard about that, it was in this book, which I shared with many of you. It's called Toward a Psychology of Awakening. This is the hardcover book because I got it when it just came out. After I graduated from college, first I worked at a nonprofit, and then that nonprofit folded after like 8 months. And so I got a job at a bookstore, an independent bookstore. It was like a spiritual bookstore. And I was like, so psychotic reading everything every time a book came in. I would just like eat it. I was like so hungry for spiritual wisdom, and I would just like stand in the store and just try to imagine that all the words from all the books were like merging with me. But I remember when this book came in. It's called Toward a Psychology of Awakening by John Wellwood. Buddhism, psychotherapy, and the path of personal and spiritual transformation. When this book came in, it just caught my eye, and I remember I took it home that night from work. And as I started reading it, I was just blown away because so much of what he talked about in this book really resonated for me, and it articulated something that I had experienced and seen inside myself, as well as around me in the spiritual, worlds that I moved in. I just witnessed a lot of what he was talking about in here. And so the term spiritual bypassing was actually coined by John Wellwood. And I think it's important and valuable to go to the source, where something is coming from, who coined the term, what is the context in which it's being used. So this is the place where I first came upon it. And like I said, I think I was like 23. And I want to read to you what he said about it because I'll share my words and my reflections, but I want to start by honoring him. So John Wellwood was a transpersonal psychotherapist, and he did a lot of work in this realm, and also in the realm of intimate relationships. He's written a lot of really wonderful books about that. Um, so you can look him up. He's got a lot of beautiful books. But I want to just share with you some of his words about this that I put aside. So he said, spiritual bypassing is a term I coined to describe a process I saw happening in the Buddhist community I was in, and also in myself. I so appreciate his willingness to be honest and transparent that this is also something that he experienced. Um, I just really respect and appreciate his openness about that. Although most of us were sincerely trying to work on ourselves, I noticed a widespread tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. When we are spiritually bypassing, we often use the goal of awakening or liberation to rationalize what I call premature transcendence, trying to rise above the raw and messy side of our humanness before we have fully faced and made peace with it. And then we tend to use absolute truth to disparage or dismiss relative human needs, feelings, psychological problems, relational difficulties, and developmental deficits. I see this as an occupational hazard of the spiritual path, in that spirituality does involve a vision of going beyond our current karmic situation. Trying to move beyond our psychological and emotional issues by sidestepping them is dangerous. It sets up a debilitating split between the Buddha and the human within us, and it leads to a conceptual, one sided kind of spirituality where one pole of life is elevated at the expense of its opposite. Absolute truth is favored over relative truth, the impersonal over the personal, emptiness over form, transcendence over embodiment, and detachment over feeling. One might, for example, try to practice non attachment by dismissing one's need for love, but this only drives the need underground so that it often becomes unconsciously acted out in covert and possibly harmful ways instead. So this just a few words, and so we want to go into the subject today. I think there's just so much in there. There's so much richness in there, and I want to start by sharing from my own experience that spiritual bypassing is something that I've had so much experience with. Because I started on the spiritual journey, whatever that means, because honestly, I really believe everyone is on spirit. Spiritus is connected to breath, to breathing. If we're breathing, we're on a spiritual journey because we're a soul and a body. So everybody is spiritual just by nature, of being here. We were birthed here through some mystery that we don't understand. We really can't take responsibility for whatever that mystery is. So by nature, we're all a part of that spiritual mystery of life. But for me, I started getting interested in spirituality when I was pretty young, like a teenager. And I didn't, at that time, have a lot of mentors. And I was kind of just exploring a lot of it on my own. I had met a medicine man, a Lakota medicine man that I've talked about before when I was 16. And he became a very important person in my life who started to, I learned a lot from him. I spent some time with him and he taught me many things, but I started reading and learning, when I was pretty young, just on my own, and I was in my own little world with it. And what I started noticing was that I began to, I guess you could say, misinterpret the teachings or use them in a way that was a bit harmful towards myself, but I wasn't aware that I was doing that. So, for example, I had created this ideal image, this ideal spiritual image of what I should be. And whenever I fell short of that, which was basically every 5 minutes, I really could not, I had a hard time accepting that. And so I was turning these spiritual teachings into this ammunition, thinking, oh, I should always be compassionate and patient and forgiving and loving and all of this stuff, but not really understanding even what those words meant to me and what that even meant, what that looked like in action. So it became a spirituality of shoulds, if that makes sense. And over time, it really wore me down to the point that, I completely collapsed, which I won't go into too much about that because many of you know the story of, how my music came to be, came out of a very difficult time in my life, a time of darkness and despair and depression that lasted for 3 years. When I really lost sight of everything, I couldn't find the spiritual well that I had been drinking from had dried up, and I didn't know where to go to find that sustenance anymore. And all of that, the ways in which I was using spirituality against myself, trying to push away my humanity, I couldn't maintain it anymore. It was almost like being in a constant fight or flight state because I was trying to live up to this ideal person, spiritual person that seemed so out of reach. And I think that's an interesting thing because I think oftentimes on the journey there is a gap, between this person that we are and this person that we would like to be, that we see over there somewhere. And yet there's a gap between the experience of that and what we are. You know, I might like to see myself as this perfectly equanimous person who's always patient and forgiving, who never gets stressed out, who always turns the other cheek, is always compassionate and has wisdom all that, whatever I might have in my mind. But yet here I am in my, imperfect humanity with all of my stuff that's coming up and my anxieties and my fears and my just my stress, whatever it is. And there's that gap there. So not knowing how to work with that gap can lead to bypassing, this experience of bypassing, which takes many different forms because this gap between who we are and who we want to be creates, like John Wellwood was saying, creates this split, inside of us where, I have this human self and then I have this spiritual self, and somehow they're not united. And if we have a divide in our being like that, something is going to be awry, because there's no harmony, there's no integrity, there's just like this split. And really, our spirituality is and should be woven into our humanity. It's just a part and parcel of who we are, of our life. And so that was a very difficult lesson that I had to go through. And I think one of the reasons why this term spiritual bypassing is so relevant and so important is is because it's really, I think, a reflection of the culture that we live in. We live in a culture of avoidance in many ways. And on a very like simple level, you could almost say that spiritual bypassing is a fancy way of talking about avoidance and repression. And we do live in an avoidance culture. Everything here in our world is meant to um, distract us, from the things that make us uncomfortable, to distract us from sitting with ourselves. We don't ever have to sit with ourselves. We can always have phones. I mean, just in this room, I have like so many gadgets. I have phones and all this stuff. It's like there's always something to do to keep our mind occupied and to keep us from feeling all of that stuff, that human stuff that we often don't want to feel. And sometimes, of course, it's important and valuable to just take some space from all of that stuff that's coming up within us. But if we constantly are avoiding our humanity, then this can create a problem. This can create um, even more of a deep split and basically extricate. I don't know what the word is. It basically exiles us from our being, when we're not able to be with ourselves at all. Oh, there was this quote I wanted to share from John Welwood from an interview about this idea of an idealized person. I thought this was so powerful. He said, one Indian teacher, Swami Prajnapad, whose work I admire, said that idealism is an act of violence. I mean, that's a really powerful statement. Idealism is an act of violence. Trying to live up to an ideal instead of being authentically where you are can become a form of inner violence if it splits you in two and pits one side against the other. When we use spiritual practice to be good and to ward off an underlying sense of deficiency or unworthiness, then it turns into a sort of crusade. That is such a powerful statement. And that is basically what John Welwood was saying about how this term spiritual bypassing came to be, because he was witnessing people who had, these deep spiritual experiences and could talk about the spiritual path and use all of the language and the lingo and everything, but yet within them there was like this sense of deficiency. And so instead of being able to address that sense of deficiency or unworthiness, the people that he worked with, he noticed how they were using spirituality to kind of try to cover that over or to create another identity. He calls it like a compensatory identity that they created, like a spiritual identity, to try to mask or push away that other one. And this is really something that we all do, And so because we are living in this, culture, like I said, of avoidance, where we're just taught to always go away from ourselves. We're taught to seek our happiness outside. We're taught that we don't have what we need and we need to go elsewhere to find it. That can very easily be applied to the spiritual path. We can easily take that way of being and just put it into our spiritual journey, and feel like, okay, I can't deal with this, so I'm going to just escape into my spiritual path instead of actually using it to meet what is. I can use it to avoid being with this person. So there's a lot there. And I guess in some ways we could say that spiritual bypassing is almost like the shadow of spirituality. And it's partly because when we don't address our shadow, and what is our shadow? I mean, there's many different ways to talk about what the shadow is. But, when we're young, we're very sensitive, right? Our nervous systems are so sensitive, and we're very open and sort of free with who we are. And often certain parts of ourselves are not seen or are chastised or judged by our caretakers. And so we may get the message, that these parts of us are bad or wrong, being too sensitive, being angry, being whatever it may be. And so knowingly or unknowingly most of the time if we're young, we kind of put those parts away, right, into the shadow, so to speak. And then we try to contort ourselves into what other people want us to be, to fulfill other people's expectations so that we can be approved of, so that we can be liked, so that we can be good girl or good boy, right? I mean, we all do this in different ways. So then the time comes that if we don't actually go back and look at those parts of ourselves that we placed into the shadow, then they can kind of, pull us from behind, so to speak. They can create, a lot of challenges in our life. And so it's an opportunity. The spiritual journey is an opportunity to go into that place That's why the dark night of the soul is such a common metaphor, because all mystics really went into the depths of and darkness in different ways to find the jewels, to find, what would help them to feel closer to their true self or to the divine, however they might conceive of that. So when we don't acknowledge, those parts of ourselves, then we can use spirituality as a way to justify, certain behaviors or, certain uh, feeling of deficiency or lack within us, if that makes sense. So I'm going to share with you some different ways that spiritual bypassing can manifest, because I think it's really interesting to just become aware of it. And the main thing I want to say, in this conversation as we're talking about it, is that I've noticed in the conversation around spiritual bypassing just a lot of a shaming type of attitude, blaming and shaming either people who are spiritual bypassing, who are actually engaged in that. They may be looking on other people, with like a superior type of attitude and shaming other people or blaming other people. Whereas other people who may be looking at people who are bypassing, they may judge them like, oh, you're spiritually bypassing. It's like shaming people who are doing this behavior. And I don't know if that makes sense, but basically what I'm saying is that I don't really think that inquiring into these things with any type of attitude of shame and blame is really helpful at all. I don't think we grow and learn very well in that type of environment. When you point fingers at someone and say, "Oh, you're doing this, you're bad, that's wrong," what's wrong with you? It shuts us down and it freezes us, and it harkens back to a younger time when we probably experienced that type of shaming. And we have enough shame really already within us, that I think it's best to look at these things with love and with curiosity to try to learn, and not with the attitude that we've done anything wrong. Because the truth is, whatever you want to say about spiritual bypassing or anything, it's a kind of defense mechanism. And there are reasons why we have defense mechanisms. There are reasons why. There are reasons for everything in life. In the Buddhist tradition, they talk about causes and conditions. There are so many different causes and conditions that contribute to anything. And so it's important, I think, to look through the eyes of compassion and understanding and recognize that if we ourselves are engaging in the practice of spiritual bypassing or the way of thinking of spiritual bypassing, or we're experiencing the effects of it from another person, or we're witnessing it, that to recognize that it's coming from a place of hurt. Usually it's coming from a place of woundedness or a place of feeling a lack. And so what's needed is understanding and love and compassion for oneself, not berating or shaming. So that's really important to say, because I feel like that, and I know for my own self on my journey with this subject, to just put more logs of shame onto the fire of shame that already is going on is not useful. And so I feel like approaching this subject with love and also with humor is really helpful. Humor cuts through a lot, and we have to be able to laugh at ourselves on the path, because it can get pretty heavy and a lot of stuff can come up, so it's so valuable to be able to laugh at ourselves and to look at things through the eyes of humor as well. So okay, so here are some examples of how spiritual bypassing can manifest, and I'm sure we could go on and on about it, but I just want to offer a few things so that we can all become aware of whether we're doing this or whether we're observing this happening. So one of the ways that this often manifests is through what's sometimes called toxic positivity, right? So everything is always shrouded in positivity and light, and everything is always love and light, and when we don't really want to look at the difficulty in things or the pain or grief around something, we might just say it's all good, man, because that's the culture we're living in. If somebody asks you how you're doing, there's so much of that. Oh, I'm good, man. I'm good. You? Oh, man, I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, cool, man. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's it. It's like there's nothing more to say. It's like we're all good, man. But where do you go with that? When you just are constantly like only focusing on good vibes, then there not only is that insincere some of the time, but it also shuts the door for real intimacy and connection. If I just sit here and I just say, I'm totally good, man. I have nothing going on. I'm just going to tell you about spiritual bypassing and then, you can figure it out for yourself, but I'm detached. It doesn't affect me. Or you're not going to feel connected to me. What connects us is the honesty and transparency about the human journey and the shared human experience with all of its shadow and light. And so when that toxic positivity comes through and all we see is like these images in our news feeds or like social media feeds or whatever of people who have seemed to have gone beyond whatever the human struggles are, no more anxiety, no more depression, everything is just like beautiful and pure. It's unrelatable, really. And I think it can create challenges because it's hard to grow and connect when we're only given the message that one side of life um, it matters or is superior to the other. In the passage that I read to you, John Wellwood was talking about the relative and the absolute truths, which is a Buddhist teaching that I think I mentioned it in my course that's on the app just briefly. But the idea is that there are two truths or two realities really in life. There's the absolute truth, which is like the unchanging, transcendent reality, so to speak, that there's an undercurrent of whatever you want to call it that is unchanging, that is basically just the nature of reality, not affected by the temporal changes in life. And then we have our relative truth, our relative existence, which is this person, this woman with her history, with her challenges, with my stories about everything, and it's constantly changing. And that is my relative reality. And when there's that spiritual bypassing that happens, often we favor the absolute and we think the absolute is superior. My human needs, my human longings, my human emotions and wounds are inferior and they're blocking me on the path. So I should only focus on the absolute, the pure, transcendent reality, and that's it. But even if we think that, even if we are committed to that absolute truth, if we actually look at our life, we can see that the realization of that is not happening. Most people, we can talk really beautifully. I could give you a beautiful talk about, you know, absolute truth and everything I've read or experienced about these highfalutin concepts, but if you actually look at my life, you'll see that I am not living day to day as an embodiment of that. I'm working through all my stuff. There are perfect masters, who have and who do show us the way. They show us an example of what that looks like. But if we only like parrot these things and we're not living them, then again, it creates that gap. So, another way it shows up, as I mentioned about the blaming and shaming, is, basically telling people that they're at fault for what they're experiencing. When you think about the language of law of attraction and manifestation, I mean, that's a huge conversation in itself. But when somebody is going through a difficult time and somebody says to them, oh, well, you manifested that. Why do you think you manifested that? When I went through these 3 years of being ill, nobody could understand why I was sick. I went to so many doctors and nothing helped me. And I felt like such a failure because I felt like I have all of these spiritual tools at my disposal. I have all of this and yet I can't seem to get better. What's wrong with me? And I remember a number of times, like some people that I was friends with or that were in my world saying to me, have you thought about, why you drew this into your life? Like a shaming kind of thing. Like, you manifested this, you know that, right? Why do you think you manifested it? It's like really kind of unkind. Now, while there may be truth that the way I was living and the way I was thinking may have contributed to my experience, that attitude was really not helpful for me. And it kind of shut me down more and it just contributed more to whatever feelings of, insecurity or low self-worth may already have been there. But the truth is, the reason that people say that is because they have a sense in their mind of what is good and what is bad. So if you're saying to someone, why do you think you manifested sickness? It's sort of like saying this sickness is bad and what did you do? Why are you at fault for creating that? But the truth is, through that experience of being ill, I discovered music. If I hadn't gone through that experience, I probably would not have found my voice or found songs. So when you just set up that kind of dichotomy and you just say you manifested this, something's wrong with you, you should really check yourself and see what you're doing to bring that into your life. It's actually negating like a whole um, swath of reality, which is the truth that sometimes going into difficult experiences, sometimes difficult times, have immense treasures for us. And if we only say everything should be happy and joyful and light and pretty, then first of all, that's not reality. Second of all, it blames people and makes them feel bad for what they're going through. And third of all, it discounts the incredible wisdom and awakening that can come through the friction and chaos of human experience, if that makes sense. So I think that's something to really look out for. If you're going through something, I think it's, and we all are in different ways, to be mindful about the way that we all talk to ourselves about that. I've had many different challenges and times when I haven't been able to work through something, or I've been struggling with something for what feels like a long time. And that thought often creeps in, like, what am I doing wrong, or why isn't this getting better? But I think we need to zoom out and realize that there's a much bigger context. There's something so much more going on than we can understand. And it's not just as simple as that. And also to just always come back to that idea that, you're manifesting your reality is incredibly insensitive to people who are really going through deep, deep suffering. Who nobody would say to, a refugee who's fleeing a country, why did you manifest? Why didn't you just manifest a better experience for yourself? Even just saying that, I don't even like saying that out loud, but I think you can get what I'm saying. Another way that spiritual bypassing can show up is through almost a kind of spiritual elitism or like a spiritual superiority. Because what often happens is, as John Wellwood was saying, we create this so called spiritual identity, right? To mask this sense of deficiency. And so there can be that attitude or that feeling like, oh, what, you don't know about this? Oh, you don't meditate? Oh, you'll find out about it one day. It's okay. One day you'll be in the know like me. I'm in the know. I know it all, but it's okay. You'll know one day. You know what I mean? That kind of attitude, like that our spirituality makes us feel like we're better than others, or makes us feel like we figured out something and other people haven't. That type of like spiritual arrogance is also not that pleasant to experience on the receiving end or the giving end. And I think it's very connected to a teaching from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who was a Tibetan teacher who came to the States, and he actually established Naropa University, which is where I got my master's degree. He wrote a book, I have it here too, called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which is a fantastic book. And in it, he talks about this idea of spiritual materialism, which is how we can often use the trappings of spirituality to try to create the so-called spiritual identity, which I have a lot of experience with. I'll share a story with you, but I just want to read something to you if I can find it that I think is really great. It feels so good to hold a book, not like I miss like books. Everything is like digital now. Okay, I'm going to read you this passage from Chogyam Trungpa. I know I'm going really fast, but I want to share as much as I can, and I want to do a practice as well. So, sorry for blowing through this fast. So he says, "We have come here to learn about spirituality. I trust the genuine quality of the search, but we must question its nature. The problem is that ego can convert anything to its own use, even spirituality. Ego is constantly attempting to acquire and apply the teachings of spirituality for its own benefit. The teachings are treated as an external thing, external to me, a philosophy which we try to imitate. We do not actually want to identify with or become the teachings. So if our teacher speaks of renunciation of ego, we attempt to mimic renunciation of ego. We go through the motions, make the appropriate gestures, but we really do not want to sacrifice any part of our way of life. We become skillful actors, and while playing deaf and dumb to the real meaning of the teachings, we find some comfort in pretending to follow the path." Ouch. That's very wise. Wise, wise, wise words. And so true. We can often use our spirituality without even meaning to create this so-called spiritual image for ourselves. But the problem comes again with that gap when we can't live up to that image. And then when we can't live up to it, we fall down and we feel like, oh, I failed. I've fallen back on my path. I'm so far away from it. And then we feel even deeper that those sense of like being deficient, if that makes sense. I remember when like in the early years, the first many years of my path, I was so into like learning about spirituality, and I wanted everyone to know that I was involved in this stuff. I just felt like I needed to somehow have it be known and seen because I wanted to have that as part of my identity. It wasn't like I was consciously thinking that, but I think some part of me wanted to like feel a sense of worthiness or a sense of, um, I don't know. I just wanted people to see that. And I remember, you know, just doing different things that were kind of out of that didn't come from a deep true place, but came from a place of like, okay, well, I'm wearing this, these beads now. Do you see my beads? Do you see the beads? Do you know what that means that I have these beads on? Not consciously. In the first like 5 or 6 years that had met my spiritual teacher Amma at her programs, a lot of the times the people who were on the tour staff would wear white clothes. And in a lot of spiritual traditions, the monastics, the swamis or renunciates, or the monks and nuns will wear robes of different colors, brown or white or orange, ochre, yellow, and they signify different things. And white is, of course, a color of purity and beautiful. I am always like spilling food on myself, so white is not the greatest color for me. But anyway, the people on the tour staff were always wearing white, and a lot of my friends would wear white, and I had a really big resistance to it because I just felt like, I don't know, I feel like if I'm just wearing only white, I'm not really being myself. I'm like conforming, and somehow I don't want to do that. That's what I was thinking to myself. Like, I'm not going to do that wearing all white thing. And then one time I was at a program and a friend of mine said, have you thought about the fact that it's, your ego is resisting like wearing white because you just you don't want to do it, you're just resisting it. And it struck me and I thought, "Oh my god, you know, maybe it's true. Maybe I'm really resisting it and maybe my ego is getting in the way and I should just become, a holy woman who wears all white clothes and is just has the equipoise that everybody else who wears these beautiful white clothes with no wrinkles on them has." And so I made a decision that at the next program retreat that Amma did, I was going to only wear white, which I never did before. I got all these white clothes. I went to the program. It was a couple of days, and I just wore only white the whole time. And I felt so uncomfortable because it was completely not natural to me, and it wasn't coming from a true place. It was coming from a place of like, I should do this, and I think this means something, and I want to be seen that I'm doing this thing. And so I wore these white clothes, and every time I went up to have a blessing or something from Amma, she completely ignored me. The whole time, the entire retreat, she just completely ignored me. No matter what, even if I was right in her face, it was like there was nobody there. And I remember thinking like, hey, I'm like, do you see? I'm like, I'm doing the thing, like wearing the white clothes, and I'm like, I'm spiritual now. Don't you see that? I remember thinking unconsciously, like, I can't believe you're ignoring me when I did this whole thing. Nothing. And I was so bummed out because I just thought, I can't believe it. I finally surrendered. I surrendered, right? And I'm wearing these white clothes, and she doesn't care. I went home and I was going through this whole thing. And when the plane landed and I got my bag from the, down in the baggage claim, I had this like black suitcase that had like some little suede patches on it. And the bag had been left out in the rain for some reason. When I got it, it was wet. And when I got home to wash my clothes and I opened the bag, all of the white clothes were stained black. They all had huge black, you know, patches all over them, and I couldn't get it out. Every piece of white clothing. And at first I was like upset about it, and then I just started laughing because it just was such a perfect message. And the message that I got from that I still remember to this day, it was a long time ago, was that it's not necessary to posture, to pretend to be something you're not. And actually no real spiritual master is going to pander to that and doesn't want that. Amma says it's not about whether you wear ochre robes or whether you wear white. It's about you should dip your mind in that dip your mind in the color of ochre, which represents renunciation. It's not about the external show. It's about the truth of whether we're actually like embodying that, living that in our mind. And so that message that came through for me was so humbling and so important. I was probably 23, 24 or something, and I remember just thinking, okay, I'm not going to just try to be somebody that I'm not. I'm just going to be myself. I have to learn how to be myself and not try to project this spiritual image, so to speak, if that makes sense. So, other ways that spiritual bypassing can manifest, maybe being overly detached, right? Yeah, man, no, I'm fine. I'm good, you know. It's like if last time many of you were at my session when about my friend Charlie who died, and if I were to be kind of in that place of using that over detachment, I could have just said, you know, it's all good. I mean, I'm really sad that he's gone, but there's a reason for everything, and it's all an illusion anyway, but it's all good. He's where he needs to be. Everything happens for a reason. And you know, I'm detached, you know, I'm okay. I mean, it was great, but he's gone now and I'm fine. I mean, obviously that just seems absurd, but there are times when we can get into that place of like a defense, like, yeah, no, I'm fine with it. Somebody really hurts us. We don't really want to feel it, or we feel like it's maybe like the higher path to take to just not feel anything about it. We may say, yeah, I mean that person was horrible to me, but it's cool. I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm undetached. But are we really? You know? It's just a good question to contemplate. And why is it somehow better to just be detached? Well, sometimes it may be, but I don't know that we can say always across the board that it is. So when we bypass our true feelings, sometimes we end up hurting ourselves. You know, I remember also many, many years ago when I was in my 20s, I was involved. This guy, and he was like so deep in this spiritual path. He was like meditating like 100 hours a day. He was a drummer. I remember he was doing all this, and we had this whatever we some kind of relationship connection between us, but it was not a healthy situation at all because he was kind of coming and going all the time, pushing and pulling, and I didn't know where I stood or what it meant and what was going on. And every time I would try to talk to him about it, you know, he would just say, "Hey, man, you know, I'm like a cloud. I'm detached." And I'd be like, "Okay, okay, you're detached. I should be detached too. I shouldn't have any feelings about this. I should just." I get it. You know, it's only me. I'm being needy or something if I actually want to have a conversation with this person. And so I went into another expression of spiritual bypassing, which is being sort of overly compassionate, but not compassionate in a healthy way. Chogyam Trungpa sometimes refers to it as idiot compassion, you know, where basically saying, I understand, you know, your wounds or your trauma, and I know you're doing the best you can, and so it's okay. However you want to treat me is fine. I'm always gonna be forgiving. I'm gonna be compassionate. I'm gonna say it's okay, whatever happens. Many times we do this, you know, thinking like, I want to be a good person. I want to be a spiritual person. I don't want to hurt anybody. And so if I assert my needs or if I speak up if somebody does something that I don't like, then maybe it's disrespectful, or maybe it means that somehow I'm not spiritual anymore, or maybe it means that I'm not a good person anymore. But that's a trap as well, because it doesn't really help us or anyone to just become a doormat, right? I mean, being compassionate doesn't mean just allowing anybody to treat us any which way. There has to be some self-respect involved. There has to be an awareness of like a boundary, like when somebody crosses that boundary that doesn't feel good. We have to be able to know that and to articulate it. I think it's really something that I've had to learn a lot about and always continue learning about. You know, what does that look like? What does it look like to honor myself in a way that is loving and understanding, um, and that I don't create some story about it that suddenly I'm a horrible person. You know, if somebody isn't treating me well, I should be able to know that. I want to share something with you about this because I think this is important. Robert Masters is another author who's written about spiritual bypassing. He has a book about it that's also really great. And here he's writing about compassion. He said, blind compassion is rooted in the belief that we are all doing the best that we can. When we are driven by blind compassion, we cut everyone far too much slack, making excuses for others' behavior and making nice in situations that require a forceful no, an unmistakable voicing of displeasure, or a firm setting and maintaining of boundaries. These things can and often should be done out of love, but blind compassion keeps love too meek, sentenced to wearing a kind face. This is not the kindness of the Dalai Lama, which is rooted in courage, but rather a kindness rooted in fear, and not just the fear of confrontation, but also the fear of not coming across as a good or spiritual person. When we are engaged in blind compassion, we rarely show any anger, for we not only believe that compassion has to be gentle, we are also frightened of upsetting anyone, especially to the point of their confronting us. There's a lot here. There's a lot. I mean, we could spend the whole session just unpacking that. There's so much there. But that's another interesting way that I think spiritual bypassing can manifest itself, or it has for me. Thinking, okay, I see what these spiritual teachings are. I know how I'm supposed to behave. But yet, if I feel like someone is really hurting me or disrespecting me, am I just supposed to just be quiet and not have a response at all? Or do I just, allow myself to just take that? Or is it compassionate to say, no, like, this doesn't feel good to me. This isn't okay. I don't like when you do this. It's like you can, we can trust in the divine, so as the metaphor goes, but we still need to tie up our camel, right? If we can know that everything is an illusion, or everything is God, or everything is one, but we're not going to stand on a train track as the train comes. We have to get out of the way. We have to take care of ourselves. So I think that's something really important to be mindful of as well. Often John Welwood spoke about the idea of premature transcendence, trying to go beyond this self before we've actually fully developed it and fully allowed it to be. And I think there's something so profound about that, that I know for my own self, I've struggled with that, especially when I was younger. Like, I wanted to go beyond this human person before she actually was formed in any way. And I remember sitting with Father Thomas Keating, who was really an amazing teacher, and he started the centering prayer movement. And he said once that, we can't give up something like our ego until if that we haven't actually formed yet. We can't give up, you know, something that we haven't had. So we have to actually have and be in that ego before we can give it up. Otherwise, we're trying to give up something that we have no, we don't have that. We don't know what that is yet. And if you look at like realized masters or spiritual masters, they have a very strong sense of self. They have a very strong, almost personality, but yet it's like full of space. It's really interesting. This is my experience anyway, that there's a very strong presence and essence of a person, whether Amma or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh. I mean, so many different people that I've studied with. They have such a strong presence, but yet there's a feeling of just complete spaciousness in them. There's like an emptiness, there's no one there, but there's somebody there. There's such a strong presence, but there's also nobody there, nothing there at the same time. It's really fascinating. So there's so much more we could talk about with this, but the last thing I want to mention around spiritual bypassing that I think is really important is, in the social realm, because spiritual bypassing can often be used to justify a lot of social issues and social problems. When we think we're coming from the perspective of oneness, but actually that attitude may in fact be causing harm. For example, saying, I don't see color, or all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter. A caterpillar matters, a bird matters, horses matter, octopi. Is it octopi? Octopuses. I don't know why I chose that, but they matter. All human beings matter. But the fact is, the way our society is set up is that all lives are not treated like they matter the same. This is just the reality. There is major disparity going on. People who look like me, who have this white privilege, are benefited so much more by the structures of society. And it's important to know that. It's important to look at that, because if we don't acknowledge it and take responsibility for it, how will we ever help to bring change? If we pretend that there's no such thing as racism, then it's impossible to do anything to change it. And so, no, all lives are not treated like they matter. So if we just say that, thinking that it's like a beautiful rainbow vision, we're not actually looking at the reality of what's going on. I mean, a good friend of mine's son just got his driver's license. I mean, she's terrified of her son, her black son, driving because she doesn't want him to get pulled over. She doesn't know what will happen to him. She's living in a kind of fear that other people may not experience. Why is it that black women are 4 times more likely to die of pregnancy related, issues than white women? These things matter a lot. And so I think when using like sweeping, comments about, it's all one, all lives matter, that actually it doesn't help, and it's not true. It is true in the absolute reality, when I'm talking about the absolute truth. Of course, everything matters. Everything has the same consciousness in it. Everything has the same awareness in it. But in the relative plane, that is not what's playing out. And so I think, to look at that, how we may be using spiritual platitudes to justify things that actually need attention and need a light shined on them. That's the other thing that I think is fascinating, is that when people say love and light, sometimes I've seen a lot of like posts on social media and stuff of people saying it's not all love and light, rolling their eyes. Oh, people always talk about love and light as if they're kind of like these cheap throwaway terms. But actually, if you really look at love and light, there's nothing cheap and throwaway about those two words. Love and light are powerful illuminators and revealers. Light shines in and reveals everything. It illuminates everything, and love does the same thing. That's why if you fall in love with someone at first, it's like, oh, everything is a honeymoon, it's so beautiful, and then love shines in and starts to illuminate the places that haven't had light on them. The love starts to illuminate those places in us that are hurt or that are shut down or wounded or whatever. And so love is an illuminator, it's a revealer. So when we say love and light, I think it's important to think about what we mean by that, because those are the two most powerful forces in existence. Amma often does a meditation, Ma Om, where we breathe in Ma, breathe out Om, and Ma is love, Om is light. Because light and love are everything, and they're not shallow principles. They're the nature of everything. And they are the forces that help us to know ourselves, to awaken, to who we are. So there's a great depth in that. I think it's in the context of all of this, as I said in the beginning, what is most important is compassion. Because we do these things because we do the best we can where we are at that time. The behavior that maybe I had, the way of thinking or the way I acted when I was in my early 20s is different from now. And I'm sure in 20 years it will be different from even now, right? Because there's constantly evolution happening. And I think it's important to just look within ourselves in a loving way, to try to bring light and understanding about why we may have these defense patterns or why we may want to avoid certain aspects of ourselves. It's painful. It's painful sometimes to see and feel these things within ourselves. But those are the places within us that need love and they need attention. There is often that gap. Anyone can say it's all one heart, one love. But when someone says that, chances are that they may not be living that statement in their everyday reality. So I think it's better to be honest, and have these conversations and be real about, what we're bumping up against or what's causing us to struggle. In my experience, when a realized master or, a great soul, a Mahatma, talks about oneness, or oftentimes there's not really much to talk about because it's just a transmission from their being, from the way that they are. They don't need to say anything. And when someone like that does speak about these things, it's done in such a way that doesn't cause people to feel shame because they're embodying it. So I think there's so much value in saying so hum, to sing so hum, to connect with the truth that I am, and to have that prayer, that realization that we're saying, with our mouth or that we're singing may become an embodied experience, an embodied reality. And if it isn't an embodied reality right now, there's nothing wrong with that. We're not at fault for that. We don't need to like blame or shame ourselves or act like we've done something wrong. That is part of the journey of waking up, of seeing, you know, of coming into something in a deeper way. It might start intellectual, but then suddenly it becomes something that we feel emotionally or that we inhabit physically over time. That is just the process that happens. So I think a deep understanding and acceptance is really important for where we are, and not trying to be somewhere that we're not, but to actually be where we are. Um, I shared a quote once in one of my live sessions from Anais Nin, who said, "When one is pretending, the entire body revolts." That's such a great quote and so true. It's been my experience. When we pretend to be someone we're not, there is a revolt that's happening inside of us. Even if we're not aware of it, there is that sense of a split or of something not being in alignment, and that's uncomfortable. You know, that 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 creates disharmony within us. So I think, to be able to recognize that awareness is a great transformer. Awareness begins the process of healing. There's nothing that we actually necessarily need to do, but just to become more aware of like that tendency of our mind to push something away or to defend against it, and just notice it, just see it. I mean, why is meditation so powerful? Because nothing is actually going on. We're just sitting and being aware. And through that awareness, our brain actually changes, our consciousness changes. So, in the same way, when it comes to things like this so called term spiritual bypassing, which is really, ultimately everything is just kind of semantics. It's an inner experience of pushing away experience of life. We're trying to be someone we're not, or trying to avoid dealing with our own sense of lack or deficiency. Those places need love and they need awareness. And just by doing that, I think there's a transformation that begins to happen. There's like an easing up, and there's a letting go of shame. I think healing shame is a really important part in all of this. Toxic shame, the shame that says, I'm wrong, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me. So when it comes to working with all of the stuff I'm talking about, there are so many different approaches. We can do healing practices or work with our trauma and do shadow integration work, really look at the psychological stuff that's coming up through our spiritual practice. We can really work on deepening our compassion towards ourselves and others. As we have more compassion towards our own journey, it's easier to have it towards others. Pointing a finger at others really doesn't help. Ultimately, it's better to look in the mirror than the magnifying glass, right? That's what Amma says, because we can keep pointing our finger at everyone until we're blue in the face, but then we still have to be with ourselves. So better to look within and see, okay, I see that person is doing that, this person is doing that, but how am I doing that? How is this manifesting in me? How am I behaving that way? How am I acting superior? How am I using my spirituality to defend against something? How am I trying to create an image? How, just looking at it, not with judgment, and also with humor, to be able to laugh at ourselves. When my white clothes all got dyed black, that was actually hilarious, because it was such a message, like, stop posturing, just be. You don't have to try to look a certain way or be a certain way, right? So, I mean, there's just so much more that could be shared about this. But I don't want to keep talking because I've talked for a long time now, and I would rather us do some meditation, some singing, so that we can just integrate all of this. And again, like, I just feel like this subject is just too vast to cover in this short amount of time. But the idea is just to, like I said, distill it to the essence, so that it's just something to be mindful of, because we have these pitfalls on the path. We just do. There are pitfalls that happen. Our ego is able to dress up in any which way. It can dress up as this or that, as a spiritual person, and we just need to see that and recognize that that's its nature. That's what it's trying to do. It's trying to prove its existence. It's trying to show how important it is. But there's something within us that's much deeper than that. That's much more profound and much more real than that. That's our true nature, right? It's our true self. It's that part of us that we contact in meditation or through music. That part that is not um, doing those trips, you know, that's just at ease with what is, or that is in a deep place of acceptance and witnessing. That part of us is there, that deeper presence we need to contact. So I think it'd be nice to just let all of this go, everything I've said. If there's anything of value, hopefully it will remain there and you can pick it up after. And if none of it speaks to you, you can just let it all go and um, throw it all out. Again, I'm just sharing from my own experience, a subject that I know very well. So, and something that has really caused me a lot of pain in some ways in my life, but also been a really powerful doorway for awareness and for awakening. You know, when we hit these pitfalls on the path, they're so great because they give us an opportunity to love ourselves more deeply. If we always do everything perfect and always get it right, then there's no opportunity to practice that. You know what I mean? So I find that like when these things happen and I get tripped up, there is a part of me that understands and feels, okay, thank you. Because this is happening, because I see these trips that are going on, it's an opportunity for me to accept myself beyond what I think is possible, more than I ever have before. So we need these things to happen because these are the ways that we actually put the spiritual teachings into practice in a real world way towards ourselves, right? When we feel shame, it's an opportunity to embrace it. We feel that defensive posture, it's an opportunity to come back to a place that may feel wounded and need love or need attention, understanding. So I hope some of what I've been saying today makes sense. I feel like I've said a lot. Okay, I'm not going to say anything for a little while now. Let's meditate. Thank you. Thank you for being here and choosing to be here in this session on this subject. Yeah, I really appreciate your openness and your courage to have interest in this theme. It really is meaningful to me to be able to have this conversation with you. So thanks. I hope that there's some benefit in it for you. Okay. So I want to invite you to just let everything go, like I said, and just return to center, return to yourself. If you want to close your eyes, you're welcome to do that. If you want to keep your eyes open, you can do that. You know, in all of these sessions, in all of anything, you know, in this experience, I'm just here offering my experience and sort of being the guide, but your truth is what matters. Your experience is what matters. Your life is the scripture and the laboratory, and your life is what matters. So please let go of anything I say that doesn't resonate for you and come back to your own truth, your own self. And let's quiet our minds and come back to a place where we know the truth of who we are beyond our masks. There is a place in all of us that has no mask, our true being, our true self. And with all of the things that play out in this human stage, there is like a backdrop of awareness, consciousness that is always there, that remains untouched by that. So now we reconnect to that and we come back to that absolute truth. We can go back and forth between the two, right? That relative reality of our spinning humanity with all of its shades and colors and shadows and light, and our absolute reality. It's known by so many different names and different traditions. Our true nature. When we contact that place, all of these other things just kind of fall away because really they're just thought forms. They're just thoughts. So let's find a quiet place inside ourselves now and just let all of this integrate and settle and connect to that place inside of us that remains untouched by all of this. Am I back? Oh my god. I'm so sorry. All right, that's it. I have to get a new computer now. This is happening too much. I'm so sorry, y'all. Oh my gosh. I was finally in like a deep, quiet space. I was like ascending to like a quiet place and I was just didn't open my eyes. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm frozen. I think I've been frozen for a while. I'm sorry. I was like enjoying hanging out with a medicine Buddha. I'm not even sure what you missed. You all meditated. Oh, now I only have 9 minutes left. I don't want to keep you too long. Okay. I definitely, it's time now to get a new computer because this keeps happening. And I can't even use the H button on my computer. It just doesn't work. So when I'm typing an email, I'm like banging on the H button, which is really been trying. So anyway, 9 minutes is a lifetime. Oh, thank you all for being here. I'm so sorry. I just talked and talked for an hour and then I was hoping we could go into a deep, quiet place. Did you hear? You missed all of my singing. Oh my gosh. I'm so um all right. Well, I guess I could go back to what I was doing. Um I was singing the Medicine Buddha mantra because the Medicine Buddha is, first of all, he's the great healer, Bekenze, who removes our suffering. But he removes all of our ailments and all of our suffering from the root of our suffering, which is ignorance about our true nature, right? And it's that ignorance that causes us to do all these kind of crazy things we do um, with our minds, right, on the journey. So that's why I was calling upon him. But I'm not. I was. I wasn't. I should have giggled, but I was frustrated. Okay, so I'm gonna change gears. I'm not gonna. We're not gonna do Medicine Buddha. What I'd like to sing with you actually is a song that you all know, which is I'd like to sing Loka together, and I think that's a good way to bring it home. The reason that I want to sing that is because what I think is a really good antidote to all of this spiritual bypassing stuff is actually to clarify our motivation. You know, why are we here? Why are we all doing any of this? As much as we may get swept up in all of these patterns and our wounds and traumas and defense mechanisms and our posturing, and, you know, our ego is our ego, it's going to be our ego. But there's something deeper. There's a deeper reason why all of us are here and why we're choosing to spend this time together on Sunday, and you're choosing to listen to this crazy woman frozen computer screen. But but I think there is something very powerful in that, you know, to actually for all of us to every now and then or every often and then, you know, to really look and see, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I meditating? Why am I on Insight Timer? Why am I listening to mantras? Why am I listening to live sessions? And what's the point? There's a longing, you know, there's a longing to be free from suffering. There's a longing for compassion, for love, you know, for healing. And that when we connect to that true motivation, that true aspiration, then all of that other stuff falls away. Because honestly, it's not really important, and it is important at the same time, right? And that's the duality. That's the dance of this human life, the relative and the absolute. Those human wounds, those human emotions, like they matter and they don't matter, and they matter and they don't, and it all goes together. But when we connect to our aspiration about what we're really wanting here, what really matters, that 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 is like a chiropractic adjustment, a cosmic chiropractic adjustment. It just puts us back into alignment with what we're really doing here, you know. And I mean, I'm sitting with death quite a bit right now because, you know, many of you know I lost my dear friend Charlie, and another very close friend of mine who's a sister of mine is very ill right now, dealing with a very serious illness. And so I've been spending a lot of time in hospitals, and it's been a challenging time, and it's been an awakening time. The last 2 weeks or so been pretty hard actually, and also a very humbling, good reminder, you know, about what is this precious human birth? Why am I here? What matters? Um, Love, right? Compassion, connection. There's nothing that I enjoy more than for us to be together here, for us to connect, you know, our hearts together, and to just be honest with each other and not need to have any like posturing or masks on, and to actually like take those masks off and to just be honest with one another. There's so much healing in that. So, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. I know many of you know this song, so please sing along with me. And let's sing this as a prayer for our own happiness and peace, and for the happiness and peace of the world. And let's connect to our motivation and our aspiration, right? For what the spiritual journey is all about. It's not about looking a certain way, it's not about running from anything, but really being with what is, and connecting, to what is true in our heart, that compassion, that desire to be free and to share that freedom with all. So let's sing this. And if you have to go, please go. And thank you for being here. This song is going to be 12 minutes. So I'm going to go over today. This is such a long session. So please leave whenever you need to. And if you want to stay, please stay. And thank you so much to all of you for being here. And thank you for your donations. I really, really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your presence and showing up at these lives with me. Means a lot. I know many of you know this song, so you can sing along. I'm not shaming you or blaming you, but I'm just requesting you to sing with me. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu means may all beings everywhere be peaceful and happy.
Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. May you be happy, may you be safe, may you be free, know your divinity. May you be happy, may you be safe, may you be free, and know your divinity. Om Shanti Shanti Om. Om Shanti Shanti
I just invite you to go deep inside your heart, into the depths of your heart, where your deepest longings and aspirations live, and contact your truest motivation for this life. What really matters to you? What do you really care about? What motivates you? What inspires you? Why are you on this path of self-inquiry and awakening? Why? None of us wants to live in a defended way. None of us really wants to be guarded. We all want to be open and connected. We want to feel love, to give love, to receive love, and to know our own nature as love. That's what we want. And we run from that because of all of our old patterns and learned behaviors from the time that we're very young. And those parts of us need love too. They need our understanding and our attention. And through that simple process of awareness, those old patterns begin to transform in the light of love. So feel that longing in your heart for love and peace or justice, whatever it may be for you. And feel how that longing and aspiration is so much stronger than any of those egoic patterns. There is a place in us that is so much deeper and vaster than all of those patterns, all of those samskaras, those vasanas, those inherited tendencies. That's not who we really are. Our true essence is actually pure consciousness, pure love. Now, we're not saying that as a platitude, as some kind of spiritual platitude, right, to avoid reality. But we're saying that from a place of depth, knowing that all of our human wounds and challenges are real. They're real in the relative reality. That there is an absolute space that's an embrace that holds it all. So from that place, from that wellspring of love in our hearts, that true motivation, let's just sing Om Shanti, peace, and send that peace throughout the world, and send that peace to ourselves.
Om Shanti Shanti Om. Om Shanti Shanti Om. Shanti Om. May there be peace, peace on earth. May there be peace throughout the universe. May there be peace, peace on earth. May there be peace throughout the universe. Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti Om. Om Shanti Om. Send Shanti, send peace to all the fragmented parts of yourself that may be hiding in the shadows. Send peace. Send peace to the shame. Send peace to the fear. Send peace to all of those patterns of avoidance. There are reasons for these things, and they need love. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti Om. Om Shanti Om. Om Shanti Om. Shanti, 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 Shanti Om. Shanti, 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 Shanti Om. Shanti, 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 Shanti Om. Peace in your heart, peace on earth. May we awaken and benefit all beings. May that love and light reveal who we really are and bring healing to all the places that need it. Breathe in. Hold for a moment. And breathe out through your whole body. I'd like to end with this passage, short quote from Thich Nhat Hanh.
And I shared in my circle once. I think it's really beautiful, and I think it sums up my takeaway from this subject. To be beautiful means to be yourself. You don't need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself. You were born a lotus flower. Be a beautiful lotus flower. Don't try to be a magnolia flower. If you crave acceptance and recognition and try to change yourself to fit what other people want you to be, you will suffer all your life. True happiness and true power lie in understanding yourself, accepting yourself, having confidence in yourself. Thank you. Such a beautiful message that we don't have to try to adopt another identity, some kind of spiritual identity, whatever that means. Let's just be as we are, be honest and true. And somehow we have to learn how to do that by unlearning all of the patterns and things we've done that keep us from that. But that's the beauty of gathering together in satsang, sharing a space of truth, talking honestly about the human experience. So it means so much to me that you're all here, and thank you for taking this journey with me and having this conversation. I talked a lot today, and so I apologize for the talking head, but there was just a lot of stuff I wanted to share about this subject, which really requires a lot more time and space to go into. Any one of those points that I mentioned we could talk about, but compassion is the way, understanding, humor, and clarifying our motivation, returning to that motivation all the time. It makes all of the other stuff just drop out, because it's not that important. So I'd like to end with 9 loka, which I do every time. It's just a ritual that I like to do. We chant the same mantra we just sang, loka samasta sukhino bhavantu, 9 times, wishing that the goodness that we generated together may go out and benefit all beings in the world. It's known as the dedication of merit in the Buddhist tradition. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha samastaha 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 sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you so much. I will try to post some of I shared a lot, and I'll post these things in the circle, my circle. Any of you are more than welcome to join Friends of Carrie. You can just find it if you go into the little circle icon. And I'll share some more of these, some links that you can read more about this and this subject. And may we move forward with self-respect, not allow ourselves to be disrespected, but also have compassion have love, have understanding and forgiveness. May we learn to balance the absolute and relative aspects of our lives on this very tender human dance that we're in. So thank you so so much, and it's really an honor and such just such a gift to be with you. I'm sorry about my frozen screen. Maybe by the time I do my next session, I'll have a computer that works better than this one. So thank you. I haven't set up a new live session yet, but I will do that soon. And yeah, that's all for now. I know I missed a lot of your comments. I didn't want to get too far off course because I already was yapping away more than necessary. All right, lots of love. Thank you so so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.